This is part of a lecture for biology class, week 1, day 3. All right, we're moving along through the week. Um, this part of the biology class, I always do a section on matter because everything in the world is made of matter and we are made of matter. So when we get into talking about cells and processes of cells, a lot of those things are chemical reactions. So to help you have a better understanding of what those chemicals are made of, their basis, and how they work together somewhat, we're going to talk briefly about matter. And matter is anything that has mass and occupies space. So we are matter, liquids are matter, gases are matter. There are some things that aren't considered matter. For example, like light from the sun doesn't have mass, doesn't take up space, so therefore it's not matter. But anything that you can visibly touch, feel, see, that's going to be matter. And matter can be made of different things. It can be mixtures of substances, it can be compounds, or it can be pure substances. And the pure substances are what we call elements, okay? And that's what the first topic of this video is about, are the elements. And when you think of elements, most people think of the periodic table that hangs on the classroom walls. And it's subdivided into boxes. Each box has a 1 or 2 letter symbol in it, and it represents a substance that's found on Earth. There are 92 naturally occurring elements that we have found, but the periodic tables sometimes go up to like 108 or possibly 110. And after 92, which are the naturally occurring elements, the rest of those are man-made. They have forced them together, two smaller atoms together in a lab to make a bigger atom. Those are nuclear reactions. Um, those elements are not very stable, so they don't tend to last real long sometimes. So I know there's quite a few handouts pushed out under this week, so I'm going to do some videos over them to show you what study guide goes with which handout. Also, if you have the ability to do the split screen and you want to click on this, that way you're guaranteed you've got the right handout because this is the CK12 length, which I'm projecting right here. So this particular discussion is about elements, and we can talk about pure substances, and pure substances can be elements. And because it's considered pure because it can't be separated into any other substance. So your first answer here, a pure substance is an element, and elements are considered pure because it cannot be separated into another substance. There are 92 naturally occurring elements, 92. And this paragraph here goes through what are some of the more common elements in the universe or our atmosphere or the Earth's crust. Okay. The most common element in the universe is hydrogen. The most common element in the atmosphere is nitrogen. So hydrogen, nitrogen, and the most common element in the Earth's crust is oxygen. So when we breathe in air, it's a mixture of oxygen and nitrogen, and our lungs extract the oxygen that we need to carry out cellular respiration, which is breaking down of food in our side of our cells for energy. The most common element in the Earth's crust is oxygen, and you may find that strange because when we think of oxygen, we think of a gas. But a lot of the Earth is made of sand, and a lot of sand and compressed sand makes our rocks and so forth. Sand is silicon dioxide. So dioxide means 2 atoms of oxygen. So a lot of our crust contains oxygen, chemically combined with other substances. Okay. Each element has a unique set of properties that makes it different from all the other elements on the periodic table. For example, if you look at gold versus silver, they're uniquely different. They're two different colors for one thing. They'll have different densities and they may have different melting points or boiling points. Okay. So each element on that periodic table has its own unique set of properties that makes it different from every other element or box on the table. Okay. This paragraph here talks about some examples of how elements are different from one another. They are going to talk about iron, and it has the property of magnetism, and it's also a solid versus possibly neon, which is a gas, and you pass an electric current through it. It can glow a specific color also. And then the next question was, which element's the most common in living things? It is carbon. If you're one of the sci-fi nuts, you'll always hear them talking about humans sometimes being carbon-based beings. There's a lot of carbon in us, okay? Carbon can have up to 4 chemical bonds off of one atom. And we'll talk about ionic covalent bonding a little bit later, and I will show you how carbon can have so many different types of compounds. A little history of the elements. For 2,000 years, people accepted Aristotle's idea that all matter is made of just 4 elements, and that was the earth, air, water, and fire. And they thought that for a long time. About 2,500 years, they started thinking that. And our thought processes have only changed within the last 500 years. Okay. About 500 years ago, scientists began discovering the elements that we know today. Now, if you could take an element, let's say you took some gold, and you could split a gold nugget and you keep dividing it until you get down to the smallest particle that you wouldn't even be able to see, but it was still gold. That smallest particle that has the property of gold, like all the other particles you separated away from it, that smallest particle is called an atom. So the smallest particle of an element that still has the properties of that element is the atom. And atoms usually consist of smaller particles, including protons and electrons. There's also a third particle that we talk a lot about. Those are neutrons. And I don't know if I can write on this or not. Nope, it's not going to let me write. Okay. So all the atoms of an element are just like one another and are different from the atoms of all the other elements. And elements are different from one another because the atoms of each element have a unique number of protons. So when you go across the periodic table, each box is a different element. And as you go from left to right, the atoms of the element change by 1 proton. Hydrogen has 1 proton, okay? It's over on this side of the periodic table if you're looking at me. Nope, it's over here if you're looking at me. This is hydrogen, 1 proton. You go across, there's another box by itself. That's helium. It has 2 protons. When you go down to the next row, lithium has the atomic number of 3. It has 3 protons. You go across to the next one, which I think is beryllium. It has 4 protons. Carbon has the atomic number 6. Any atom of carbon is going to have 6 protons. Oxygen has the atomic number of 8. Any atom of oxygen is going to have 8 protons. Some of them vary in their neutrons. They're called, the scientific word for that's an isotope. But an atom of an element will always have a specific number of protons. And all the atoms of that element will have the same number of protons. Okay. So it's going to talk here, what's the main element found in coal and sugar? And that is carbon. And carbon has 6 protons. And all carbon atoms are the same whether they are found in a lump of coal or a teaspoon of table sugar. On the other hand, carbon atoms are different from the atoms of hydrogen, which are also found in coal and sugar. Each hydrogen atom has just one proton and one electron. Okay, so here's your coal, here's your sugar. And the question is, why do you think coal and sugar are so different from one another when carbon is a major component of each substance? And the answer is coal and sugar differ from one another because they contain different proportions of carbon and other elements. For example, coal is about 85% carbon, whereas table sugar is 42% carbon. They both contain hydrogen and oxygen, but in different proportions. So in addition, coal contains the elements nitrogen and sulfur. So substances can be like really heavy in carbon, have a lot of carbon, but they're different because there's other elements involved, or there's more carbon atoms than there are other atoms. So when you start talking about coal and sugar, those are no longer elements, those are called compounds. Okay, sugar is a compound. And you will learn that when we talk about sugar in photosynthesis, the formula for that is C6H12O6. So C stands for carbon. The 6 behind it means 6 carbon atoms. C6H12, H stands for hydrogen. The 12 means that there's 12 hydrogen atoms in that one molecule. C6H12O6, O stands for oxygen, and there's 6 oxygen atoms in that carbon atom, or in that sugar molecule. Okay, so in summary, an element's a pure substance that cannot be separated into any other substances, and there's 92 naturally occurring elements. Those are test questions. Each element has a unique set of properties that's different from the set of properties of another element. That's a test question. And the smallest particle of an element that still has the properties of that element is the atom. That's a test question. And all the atoms of an element are like one another, but they are different from the atoms of other elements. Okay, so that kind of concludes a little bit of an overview of elements. And I'm going to end this video, and then I'm going to pick up another video for the next 2 handouts that go together.